Hello, my name is Miss Winslow and I'm the upper school librarian, and I am here to talk to you today about 5 outstanding books that you have to choose from for your Lit Circle reading. So the first book that we're going to do is The Curious Incident of the Dog at Nighttime by Mark Haddon. And the first thing to know about this book is it's a mystery. So there are a couple of elements that you always know about with a mystery. The first is that someone is murdered. Well, in this case, the person who's murdered is actually not a person but a dog, Wellington. And that's where our book opens, with Wellington's murder. So our narrator for this book is Christopher John Boone. He's actually our narrator, and he's writing the story for us, and he's telling us about his investigation of the death of this dog. So as Christopher starts to try to figure out who killed Wellington, we learn more about Christopher. We learn that he goes to a special school where he is a math genius and he's studying to take his A-levels. And we also learn that Christopher has some very interesting quirks. He doesn't like to be touched. He decides whether it's a good or a bad day based on how many red or yellow cars he sees on the way in. And we learn about his father, and we learn about his mother who's passed away. So, as with any good mystery, we find out that there's a couple of twists. And I'm not going to tell you about the twists because it'll give away too much of the story, but just know that Christopher tells us in a very straightforward way everything that's going on. And we do find out who kills Wellington, but we find out a lot of other really cool and interesting things as well. So, The Curious Incident of the Dog at Night. And this is our second book. And I don't think there's anybody who hasn't heard of Holden Caulfield. And Holden Caulfield is the main character in Catcher in the Rye, which is one of the most famous books in American literature. And the reason why it's one of the most famous books in American literature is because Holden Caulfield is kind of a jerk. He's rude, and he's been expelled from yet another school, and he kind of doesn't see life as the greatest thing going on. So, Catcher in the Rye is where Holden is talking to us about one week in particular. And it's the week between the time that he came home from school break and the time that he was expelled from school. So his parents don't know he's been expelled yet. They're not expecting him home until the following Wednesday. He's had a fight with his roommate over a girl, and he decides that instead of staying, he's going to leave, and he's going to go on an adventure. So he takes the train to New York to start his adventure. And while in New York, we start to learn a bit more about Holden. We meet some of his acquaintances, and he stays in a little bit of a seedy hotel. And we kind of start to get a sense that the hotel isn't the kind of place that he would traditionally stay in, because we start to see some of the people that Holden runs into. We meet some women in the bar that he goes to where he's buying them drinks and trying to get to know them. So we meet the elevator operator, and he makes some propositions to Holden that are very interesting. And then we start to see Holden venturing out into the city, you know, going to see some shows, meeting some friends. And eventually we see Holden sneaking back into his house. But through all this, we start to learn what's really going on in Holden's life, what he really values and what's really important to him. And so if you've never read Catcher in the Rye, it's a really, really interesting book. I call it the first real teenage angst book. So if you want to read a book about a really sad, bored, dramatic teenage boy, this would be the book for you, Catcher in the Rye. This one is Their Eyes Were Watching God, and it's by the author is Zornell Hurston. This is a really beautiful story, and it's set in the early 1900s. The main character of this book is Janie Crawford, and she is the daughter of, she's the granddaughter of an ex-slave. And so that gives you a bit of a sense of what our time period is like and what we're looking at. The main, this book is set in the South, and the main profession of most of the people in the book at that time is sharecropping. So it's kind of a story set in a rural area of Florida. And our book opens with Janie coming back home. She was gone for a while, and when she comes back, everyone is gossiping about her. And they're gossiping about her because she has long hair, and a woman of her age should not have long hair. And she's provocatively dressed. So that gives you a sense of where we're going. And Janie sits on the porch with her friend, Phoebe, and she's telling Phoebe her story of what's happened to her and where she's been and what she's been doing. And the story is told by Janie, but it's told through the eyes of 3 different relationships she's had, the relationships with the 3 husbands that she had over her life and what happened. And ultimately, like I said, this is a love story. This is a story about knowing what you think love is, knowing what love turns out to be, and what is the most important love or relationship that you have, and how Janie figured that out for herself. There is lots of interesting things in this book. There's politics, there's murder, there's a hurricane, there's even a dog with rabies. So if you're interested in a really, I don't want to say interesting, if you're looking for a really good book that's going to challenge you, but it's going to give you a really interesting story and make you think about ultimately what the life of a woman is meant to be in the early 1900s, I would look at reading Their Eyes Were Watching God. This is our 4th book, and this book is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I really think that you're going to resonate with this book for a couple of reasons. The first one is that the main character is a boy named Charlie, and he's actually writing you a letter. He's writing it to an anonymous person, so it might as well be to you. And Charlie is telling you about his life. Charlie is also a freshman in high school, just like you. And Charlie considers himself a wallflower, meaning that he kind of is more observant. He's not really in the fray of things. He's kind of sitting back and watching things. And he's also had a couple of traumas in his life. When the story starts, he's just trying to get over the suicide of his best friend. And we learn that Charlie doesn't really feel like he connects with a lot of people, that he doesn't really feel very close to his family. So he starts writing about these things, and then he makes a couple of friends in high school. Okay, so when Charlie gets to high school, he makes 2 friends. They're both seniors, so there's Sam and Sam's stepbrother, Patrick. And so we start to learn how Patrick introduces Charlie to some really interesting books, one of which is Peter Pan. And one of the cool things about this story is not only do we learn about Charlie, but we learn how Charlie experiences new books and new literature. We get to see how he feels about To Kill a Mockingbird, and he starts learning about new songs, and just how he starts opening up as a person when he starts learning about all these new things. But we also learn how Charlie starts to experience liking girls, and how he starts to experience learning that there are other kinds of relationships that people can have. And then Charlie starts to realize the responsibilities of friendship, and what happens when you cross your friends, and what happens when you stand up for your friends. So this is a really interesting book if you want to look at being a freshman through someone else's eyes, if you want to look at friendship and really starting to get to know yourself and what you look like to other people and what the world looks like to you from this new perspective of being a wallflower. Okay, this is Miss Winslow one last and final time, and I saved a really great book for last. This is The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, and Amy Tan is a genius at writing a story within a story within a story, which is really what this book is. And so this book is about 2 generations of women. The mothers in this book are all immigrants from China, and they are the original creators of the Joy Luck Club, which was a club where they met to play mahjong and to talk about their lives and ultimately to try and hold on to their culture as they immigrated from China. And the other voices in this story are the voices of their American-born daughters. And the main character who really tells our story, or who we see the story through, is June May. And she likes to be called June. And she is telling the story because her mother passes away and she takes her mother's seat at the table. And so the story really is about the mothers trying to express to the daughters the importance of their history and their culture, while also for the daughters trying to maintain who they are as American women. And there's a really cool quote from this story that for me really helps me to understand the perspectives. An Mei, who's one of the mothers, says, "I was raised the Chinese way. I was taught to desire nothing, to swallow other people's misery and to eat my own bitterness. And even though I taught my daughter the opposite, still she came out the same way. Maybe it's because she was born to me and she was a girl, and because I was born to my mother and I was a girl. And all of us, like stairs, steps above and below one another, going up and down, but all going the same way." And so what we find out in this story is the similarities between the mothers and the daughters, and also the differences in how they combine to create family. So this is a beautifully told story, and there's lots of interesting twists, and it really does touch on what it means to be a woman, what it means to be an American woman, and how to integrate your culture into your life and not let go of it. So, Joy Luck Club.